Hello and welcome to another video. In this video, we are going to be discussing natal placements, right? This is one that I have. This is why I want to talk about it, because I think it's an interesting placement. There's good to it, there's bad to it. You're always going to get that when you have a conjunction. Conjunctions provide the good and the bad. It could sometimes just be the bad. It could sometimes just be the good. It's just a mixed bag, right? It's just whatever you get is whatever you get, right? So we're talking about Pluto conjunct Mercury. An interesting placement. I'm not just saying because I have it. It's a little interesting. It's a little bit of a doozy. It's a little difficult to deal with. And I just thought it was interesting to talk about, right? So as you can see, this is the placement, or not placement. This is a symbol for Pluto, right? And this is the placement for Mercury. A little similar, but not exactly, right? So circles have the little cross at the bottom, although the cross is really short here, as opposed to being, longer on Pluto. Within your chart, right? For whatever planet you see, you're going to see these little notches here. Now, obviously, those correlate to, the degrees on the outside and where they're at. So they're very close, right? These are Pluto and Mercury's notches. So before I get into this, all right, with anything in any sort of esoteric knowledge, it is nuanced. It is very nuanced. Astrology is nuanced. It is not exact in any regard, even though there's truths to it. There's a lot to be interpreted whenever reading and learning about this type of knowledge, right? So it's just everywhere. So, you kind of have to, sift through things, take things with grains of salt. And I always encourage that, to whoever I'm speaking to, take what I say with a grain of salt. Believe what you want, believe what you don't. But try these things and sort of educate yourself on these things as well. And then come to your own conclusions, because that's what I do. And maybe it's this placement that sort of helps with that, right? Because I got a lot going on for my Mercury right there. As you can see, I got a lot going on there. So whenever you are going to, look at placements within a person's chart, natal placements, whatever it is, regardless, you need to, and I stress this, even though we're just talking about Pluto and Mercury conjunction, conjunct, I stress this with the utmost importance. You need to look at other placements within the chart to see how they work with each other, how they affect each other, and everything. It's no two charts are going to be the same. They could be very similar, but they're never going to be exactly the same, right? So, with that being stated, let's get into this. We're going to talk about the themes, right? So, let's start off with Pluto. Pluto's a bigger planet. It's non-personal. Even though I feel like that's a little difficult to say, because I feel like whatever planet, whatever places you have in your chart, they have personal effect to you regardless, right? Because it's your own personal chart, right? But it's not a personal planet. If something transits your Pluto, you're not going to feel it as strongly as if something transits your sun, right? But point is, depending on how your outer planets are placed, you could feel things a little stronger or a little less. I'm going off topic here, but yeah, Pluto themes. Pluto rules Scorpio, right? This is in new school astrology, right? Which is what I follow, right? In old school astrology, Scorpio is ruled by Mars, but we're sticking with new school here. Pluto rules Scorpio, right? Very much similar themes. Not exactly, because it's a sign as opposed to a whole entity in space. Pluto is very obsessive, I'm not even gonna sit here and deny that and just say whatever. As someone who is a Scorpio, which is similar energy, Pluto is very obsessive. It's obsessive, it's taboo. It can be controlling at times, or it could just be about power dynamics, things like that. It's considered a negative planet, and I guess I could say nothing, no placement, no sort of thing in astrology is negative. But it is considered to be a negative planet, right? And we're gonna stick with these types of words so that it's a little more simple to understand. But instead of using like the correct vernacular, right? Yeah, Pluto is considered negative. It is difficult, depending on where it's placed in your chart. Obviously, if you have positive aspects to it, it doesn't really matter. It's positive, you're going to get the positive effects of it. But with it being conjunct my Mercury, I get everything. I get the good, I get the bad, I get the great, I get the ugly, I get everything in regards to my Mercury, right? So Pluto themes, let's recap on that. Obsessive can be controlling. It can be taboo, any sort of esoteric knowledge. It can be revealing in a sense, it's like X-ray. It wants to look into things and look through things and try to understand everything in the world. And then you have Mercury. Mercury rules Virgo, and it rules, where's it at? Gemini, right? Virgo's obviously an earth sign, Gemini's an air sign. It rules those two signs, right? It rules both of them. So I would say generally you can look to those same themes. Obviously, the planet and the sign that it rules aren't going to be exactly the same. There's nuances to it. But just to keep it simple, similar themes for the most part. Mercury has to do with your mind, your intellect, your how you communicate, somewhat a sense of how you understand the world. Obviously, you still have to pass everything through your ascendant, through your rising, because that's your lens. That thing is part of you, and you can't separate your ascendant from you. Your ascendant is with you, and whatever you see and whatever you experience has to come through that. Imagine, maybe I'm going off topic, but imagine you're tiny and you're in a jar, and that jar goes over you, and no matter where you go, you cannot separate that jar from you. You have to look through that jar to see the rest of the world. That's how your ascendant works, right? So, but yeah, Mercury kind of does a little bit of that because it has a lot to do with your mind. All right, so if your mind thinks a certain way, your mind's gonna see certain things that another person's mind is not, right? Because it thinks a certain way. No two people think the same way. It's just like when you see like things like, is the dress white and gold or blue and black? Like it doesn't really matter. It's your mind is seeing whatever it wants to see, right? That's how your brain works. It interprets all this stuff. Like even how we see, our eyes, our actual image is actually flipped upside down, but our brain flips it right side up so that we can understand it and process it. Plus, there's a whole gap for the middle of our face and our nose that we don't see. Our brain fills it in with, I guess, our image processing, whatever. I don't know what you want to call it, right? Our brain is, brains are amazing, right? So Mercury, I generally like to say this for a person. It really pertains to that, how you communicate, your intellect, your mind, things of that nature, right? So when you take obsessive, extra taboo Pluto, and then you mix that with Mercury, it's like, right? When you mix that with it, it creates an obsessive mind. And I'm not gonna say I'm not guilty of this. This is my own chart. I didn't mention that. This is my chart. Generally, I'm gonna be talking about natal placements that, I have. First off, like I said, I'm new to this. I'm just trying to express and kind of talk about how I see things, and maybe I can give some value to that, right? Because like I said, astrology is always nuanced. It is always nuanced, right? So when you combine these two, you get a lot of obsessive thoughts, and I think anxiety can come from this. I think that's a big thing here. I don't really think people talk too much about it. I think anxiety, usually people look to like having Virgo placements or Gemini placements or a lot of mutable signs because they're kind of mutable. They go all over the place. But I think having anything obsessive, especially when it concerns your mind, can bring that type of anxiety, right? Your mind, your emotions, even your sun a little bit, but I think your sun is more so like your default settings. It's kind of what you revert back to. It's like the basicness of your character. It's like at your base, what are your themes and who are you? What's your character, right? I'm a Scorpio, so I have those themes, right? Which kind of adds to that whole Mercury Pluto thing here. Although my Pluto is blessed by Saturn and Uranus, so it kind of keeps me a little on track. I guess the Uranus probably takes me off, but it's a positive aspect, so it's like whatever. But when you combine those two, you get a lot of obsessive thoughts. I generally like to explain to people that my thoughts sometimes, as much as I try not to have them, they remind me of a room. Just imagine a blank room and water is filling into it, right? It's going to flood the room, right? And it's going to fill every crack and crevice of that room, right? It may even soak into the walls. It may even, soak into the floor, but it's going to fill up that room until there's no more water. There's no more space left in the room, right? That is kind of like how my thoughts are sometimes. They are very similar to being like that sometimes, where it's like I'm filling up a room of, with water, and my thoughts don't stop until that every crack and crevice is filled up. Now, obviously, I'm not a computer, or I'm human. I can't process or think of every single little, sort of instance or possibility, but I'm gonna go damn close. I'm gonna try, because that's just the way my brain works. Now, obviously, as the older you get and the more you learn about these things, you start to become aware of it, so you can kind of counteract these things. And I firmly believe, all right, because when I talk about astrology, I'm not just talking about astrology. I'm talking about just information and what I want to make sure, right, when I make these videos, right? Segue here. That even if you're not into astrology, even if you don't care about any of this esoteric shit here, right, you can still learn something from it. You know what I'm saying? A life lesson, whatever it may be. And look, I'm not perfect by any means, but you can still learn something from this, right? So as you get older, back to Pluto, Mercury, as you get older, you kind of learn the weaknesses in your chart, learn your ways, learn this, learn that, whatever. And you can kind of counteract placements like this, right? Like I know that I have this Mercury Pluto conjunction, and I know the effects of it, and I know that I can sometimes get my thoughts carried away. So because I know this, I am better equipped than someone who doesn't. You know what I'm saying? Now, through whatever information, however way you learn that you're like this, whoever, this and that, doesn't matter. It's just that you know. And with any problem, I firmly believe that at least knowing about it makes you like 50% more successful, because you know about the problem in the first place. The worst thing you can do is ignore your negativities, all right? And I'm putting it in the forefront. I don't mind talking about myself and my shortcomings and things like that. So it's important to do that with yourself, so that when you do that, you can sort of soften up those hard edges. You know what I'm saying? You can soften up those hard edges. You can sort of trim some of the fat, and you can get yourself into a better shape mentally and lead more towards, success. So, and I feel like that in regards to astrology, no matter what placements you have, if they're negative or whatever, people talk about it as negative, this and that, like, you could have like a Pluto square sun or something like that, right? I know they get a terrible rep, right? And it makes sense why, but you can always dull those edges. You know what I'm saying? And in knowing that I have this Mercury conjunct Pluto, and for knowing it for so long, I kind of have learned how to pull that back. But generally, I think this type of placement, or any sort of Pluto Mercury sort of placements, there is areas for extremes. Just like having a Uranus to a Mercury, aspect. There's extremes. There's this sort of rebelliousness to it. Not exactly Pluto's thing, but it can be there. That rebelliousness, there's a sort of radical thinking involved that Pluto creates, because Pluto is relentless. It's nonstop, right? So you have that connected to your place of thinking, the way you think. Your thoughts are nonstop and relentless. And, I don't care who you are. If you think long enough about something and hard enough about something, you will reach these extremes that don't make any sense. Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter what placements you have. Doesn't matter any of that. That's just how it works. That's just how anything works in this world. The more you spend time tinkering with something or going into it or thinking about it or whatever, you will reach those extremes. So if you're not careful, I think people with, Mercury, Pluto placements, even if it's a trine, sextile a little less, can get this sort of extremist sort of thinking, like black and white, things like that. But it really matters that if you're like this or not. Some people just think crazy and don't even realize that they're in that sort of box, honestly. Primarily a lot of the countries like that, if I'm gonna be honest. The US, it's just like a lot of extreme things going on here, especially if you look at politics, but we're not gonna get into that. When Pluto and Mercury conjunct, I think it creates a sort of environment within the mind to want to uncover everything, just literally everything. You just want to learn everything. You want to uncover everything. If I'm not sitting here talking about this stuff or doing, some sort of type of work, I'm just constantly trying to gather information, just constantly absorbing information as much as I can. I can't recall any of it. I mean, there's another reason for that, but I just absorb it. I absorb it. And then when I, get prompted, then all the information comes out. And I think a huge factor to that is that Pluto conjunct Mercury. It just wants me to uncover everything. It wants me to learn about things that I probably shouldn't learn about. It wants me to learn about things that I should learn about. It makes me want to just learn in general and just dive deep. If there's an interest there, I'm going for it. And it just doesn't stop. There's a joy to it for me personally. And it could be other placements doing it. Like I said, whenever you look at a person's chart, it's important to look at the rest of the aspects, the signs, placements, whatever, yada, yada, and see how they sort of interact with each other. But for me, I know that Pluto, Mercury, brings a lot to my mind and just the way that I am. It's probably the strongest placement to my Mercury that I have in general. And it can cause a lot of just trying to uncover things, Like I said, Mercury is the mind. It's how you communicate. It really strongly affects how you see the world because everything has to go through your mind, kind of, or your brain. Maybe not exactly your mind. It's a little more complicated than that, but if your mind's not right, you're not going to see the world right. You know what I'm saying? That's how hallucinations work. If your mind's not correct, you're not going to see things correctly. It's hard to get that deep into your brain not being right, but when it happens, it happens and you don't see the world the same way. And that's also sort of a sort of aspect to, I guess, having this conjunction is that I don't see the world very shallow. It's hard for me to see things in a shallow sense because Pluto is deep. Pluto wants to dig into things. My mind is like that. So when I see something, I'm constantly usually digging deeper between the lines or thinking harder about something or whatever. And, it could be warranted. It could make sense or it could not make sense. Doesn't matter. That's just the way the placement works. Pluto is deep. Pluto is very as far and as how can I say it? As far away as impersonal, I guess the placement is within your actual natal chart because it's like one of the outer, it's like the outer planet, one of the outer planets. It wants to be deep. You know what I'm saying? It wants to be very personal, and that is going to be. And this doesn't apply necessarily to me when it could, has this conjunct to my Mercury, but it more so applies in the sense of the things that I see, learn, and any information that I take in this world. I take it in a very deep and personal way. Like I said, not to myself, but it's like, imagine the information that I'm learning as an entity. I'm getting very intimate and deep with that entity while I'm, whenever I encounter that type of knowledge, whatever knowledge it is. It could be whatever, like me in astrology, or me in like human design. It's like human design. Imagine human design as a person. I'm very close to that person when I try to go learn about that information, because that's just how Pluto is. Pluto wants to learn. Pluto wants to be deep. Pluto wants to uncover. And you can't uncover and understand things and see patterns if you're not focused. You know what I'm saying? Now, obviously, there's different ways to see things, but generally for Pluto likes to peer through things. It's piercing. It likes to go into things, likes to look deep into them and understand them to the best of their abilities, right? So, you know, that's how it's affected me. That's how it's been for me. And I generally think this is the case for, you know, like I said earlier, for any sort of Pluto, Mercury aspects. You know, whether positive, whether negative, whether neutral, like I have. If Pluto touches your Mercury, it's going to bring some sort of obsession. It's just how far to the negative or the positive you are. You know what I'm saying? I firmly believe that there's always two sides to every aspect, even if it's a square. It's there for a reason. Because squares, I think I've said this before, squares cause tension, and tension is needed. All right? Things need tension in order to stand, to have structure. If tension didn't exist, everything would just fall apart. It'd be like water. Everything would just liquefy and fall apart. You need tension, whether it is something that is, you know, more complicated, like relationships or people or things like that, or something as simple as like a structure. You need tension. The tension keeps things together. It's just too much tension and things fall apart. But too little tension and things don't stay together, right? So, you know, I kind of rambled. I always ramble. That's that Pluto Mercury. Has to do with how I communicate. And Pluto doesn't like to stop, so I kind of ramble. But if you enjoyed it, you have anything to say, any feedback, I'm always open to it. I always appreciate it. And if you made it to the end, thank you. I appreciate you. If you found anything interesting, subscribe, comment, like, whatever it is. Dislike if you didn't like it. Talk to me. You know what I'm saying? I'm always here. I'm always open. But until then, until next time, I hope everyone enjoys their day. And I appreciate you. And peace out.